Hello, bonjour, bonsoir, je suis Sylvia Tia et aujourd'hui j'ai le plaisir et j'ai l'honneur de recevoir Lawrence Hamm qui est candidat au Sénat américain. Hello, I am Sylvia Tia and today I have the honor, the pleasure of interviewing Larry Hamm, U.S. Senate candidate. How are you, Larry?
I'm fine, and thank you for inviting me today.
Okay. So, we're going to talk about your book, A Life in the Struggle. So, A Life, I read your book. I went through your book. And what I like about your book is that I think they can make a movie. So, what I like about your book is like a history book. You can see what took place back then in the 60s, 70s. So, how long did it take for you to write this book?
Truthfully, that book was about 5 years in the making. From the time it was a concept to which I and the co-author, Annette Alston, committed ourselves to the time we actually received the first published books in hand. I learned a lot about writing books, just that whole process. And I had respect for authors before, but I have vaulting respect for them now because writing a book is a major task. I mean, from beginning to end. I mean, literally until you actually receive it in your hands. It's a work in progress. And even now, after writing this book, so many things that are not in the book, and I'm looking now toward writing a second book.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
So I see like the struggle. What are you talking about? The black struggle?
Yes, I'm talking about the Black liberation struggle here in the United States. I'm talking about the worldwide African struggle, which encompasses all people of African descent around the world. And I'm talking also generally about the struggle of oppressed and exploited peoples of all races. And in my life, I have been enmeshed in that struggle really all of my life. I guess I could say I was 17 when I actually became a conscious participant. But if you were born black in the United States of America, you're in the struggle, whether you're conscious of it or not, and in terms of being conscious of the oppression of black people, that goes back, I would say the nodal point was the Newark Rebellion of 1967. People say Newark riots. Those of us who lived in Newark, we call it a rebellion because it was a conscious response to collective oppression. It was not a riot like something that occurs after a soccer game or a football game, or a rock concert or something like that. The 67 rebellion was sparked by an incident of police brutality, as were the more than 1,000 rebellions which took place in this country between 1960 and 1972. And even since 1972, there hasn't been a decade where there hasn't been some collective uprising, some collective resistance to black oppression. I mean, we think of George Floyd, whose anniversary was the anniversary of his murder was this past weekend, May 25th, and then Michael Brown in Ferguson, and on and on and on. There are many examples. Suffice it to say that there hasn't been a decade where there has not been resistance. And I've been in that struggle all of my adult life, and not necessarily as a leader. You know, I'm not writing this book from the point of view of a leader per se, but as someone who was in the struggle and was observing everything that was going on and whose life was changed by the struggle. I mean, I'm here today with you because of how my life has been affected by our struggle for justice.
Right, that's how we met.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, that's how we met. So, Larry, you're running for Senate, right? For the.
Yes.
Can you tell me about like slavery reparation for slavery?
Yes. First of all, I have been a partisan in the struggle for reparations since 1972. Reparations is the demand for restitution, for compensation, for repair, for the damage that was done to black people as a result of our enslavement here in the Western Hemisphere and in those particular countries that we've been in the Western Hemisphere. I became conscious of the struggle for reparations in 1972. I was the youngest elected delegate to the National Black Political Convention in Gary, Indiana in 1972. And during that 5-day convention, we adopted an agenda, various positions on various domestic and international issues. And one of those was reparations for African Americans. One of the well-known personalities in the struggle for reparations was Queen Mother Moore out of New York City, who has since joined the Ancestors. But I met Queen Mother Moore on several occasions, and the first time was in Gary, Indiana in 1972 when I was 18 years old. Since that time, in 1986, Congressman John Conyers introduced legislation, H.R. 40. In 1986, he introduced this bill, which would establish a national commission of the United States government to study the issue of reparations and make recommendations to Congress on how reparations should be made to African Americans. I also met John Conyers on several occasions. And since that time, you know, back in the 80s, in the 70s, reparations, you might say, was a kind of marginal issue, but it really exploded into mainstream discussion, I would say probably by the 1990s. Congressman Conyers had already introduced his bill, but there was a fellow named Randall Robinson. And Randall Robinson became known because he was a leader in the struggle in this country against South African apartheid. But he wrote a book called The Debt. And that book really, I think, springboarded the discussion of reparations into the national arena, so to speak. And since that time, many organizations have been formed. Other organizations that were already in existence have taken up the struggle for reparations. Here in New Jersey, there was a reparations bill introduced to create at the state level what Conyers' bill does at the national level. It would create a state task force on the issue of reparations to study the issue and make recommendations to the state legislature on how the state government of New Jersey should make reparations to African Americans here, because slavery was a national institution. Many people think that slavery was only in the South. It was right here in New Jersey. It was right here in New Jersey through up to the end of the Civil War until the 13th Amendment was passed for the abolition of chattel slavery. And even then, there was resistance. For instance, when Abraham Lincoln introduced the Emancipation Proclamation in 1862, becoming effective in 1863, the state legislature of New Jersey nullified Lincoln's power to emancipate slaves in this state. Because Jersey was very sympathetic to the South, because Jersey was making a lot of money from slave-related industries.
Wow.
Jersey was a major textile producer. The textile industry was big here. Textiles essentially are cloths. And what do you need to make cloths?
And you need people
You
to work
need
in,
cotton. That's right. So the cotton would come here
down
and be
south,
turned into cloth. And so money would be made here and money would be made down there. Now, New Jersey was in the Union. It was one of the northern states, but slavery was here. In 1860, there were about 14,000 registered slaves here in New Jersey. And when at the end of the Civil War, when it came time to pass the 13th Amendment, New Jersey was not among the 27 state majority needed to ratify that amendment. And it was one of the northern states. And it would when you look at the roster, who voted for the 13th Amendment, New Jersey wasn't there. It's not even clear that they adopted the 14th and 15th Amendments. In fact, a former state legislator who's still alive today introduced a bill in the just about the turn of the century, 2000. She introduced a bill for New Jersey to ratify the 14th Amendment 100 years later. So the slavery issue is more complex. But what we're demanding reparations. Reparations is repair for the damage that was done. Now, this country has offered reparations to Japanese Americans because during World War II, this country, this government of the United States unjustly interned Japanese Americans in concentration camps. See, we only learn about the concentration camps in Europe. We don't learn about the concentration. So Japanese Americans were interned. And under the Ronald Reagan administration, believe it or not, reparations were made to Japanese Americans. Each family that had had someone or some members interned in those camps received $20,000 as reparations for that. The United States has continually made contributions to reparation funds for the Holocaust. Jewish Americans who were either themselves enslaved in Nazi concentration camps where they were forced laborers. These were concentration camps in Europe. The United States government has contributed hundreds of millions of dollars to funds to repair that damage. So African Americans are saying, if you can do reparations for Japanese Americans and do reparations for Jewish Americans, you should do reparations for those that were enslaved here from the founding of the country. And it wasn't a custom, it wasn't a practice, it was the law of the land. Slavery was literally,
It was legal.
it was not only legal, it was written into the Constitution of the United States of America. And so we're demanding reparations. That's one of the things I'm running on as a candidate for United States Senate. I'm going to sign on to legislation already in the U.S. Senate for reparations. But I'm going to do something else.
Okay.
I'm going to introduce a bill for payment. See, the current reparations bill would establish a commission to study. I'm okay with the study. I'm going to introduce a bill which I hope will speed up the process. I'm going to say, this is the amount, and this is how much money each African American family should receive. And I know that that's controversial for some folks, but you see, I don't want to engage in performative politics. Because think about it, Congressman Conyers introduced his reparations bill in 1986. So how many years has it been? It's been decades. The bill has never left committee. So what people do in order to curry favor with African Americans, they'll say, well, I support reparations. I signed on to the bill. I'm a co-sponsor. Some of them cynically knowing that the bill won't leave committee. So I say, okay, because I don't want to look unreasonable, study the issue. But while you're studying the issue, I'm going to introduce a bill for actual payment.
Wow. I don't think that the reparation should just be like about money. I know that money is important, but I also think that there's certain things that were like stolen, you know, so what do you think?
Well, I think that we should use...
Like our true identity, certain things, you know?
Absolutely. I think that one of the models that we should use for African American reparations would be the reparations that Germany has given to the Jewish people in Germany for what they suffered during the Holocaust. And their reparations are multi-dimensional. So, individuals receive money. They have a collective fund for cultural and educational development. Germany contributes to that. Germany also contributes and has contributed to the State of Israel every year since the State of Israel was founded. So they have a multi-dimensional approach, and I think we should have a multi-dimensional approach. I think individuals or individual families should receive compensation, but yes, we should have a collective fund contribute to, so no black children in the U.S. have to pay for education anymore.
Yeah, so you have free college,
right? And a fund maybe for health care, since one of the ramifications of slavery has been the poor health historically of black people in this country because of inherited trauma and other inherited issues. So I think you're right. I agree with you. I think we should have different things going on regarding the repair because the damage was multidimensional.
Right. I agree. So Larry, how do you think, how can we, like Africans and African Americans, I believe that we need to come together, you know, we need to come together to be stronger if we want things to change.
Yes.
For not just America, but also for our different nations, you know, like in Africa, the Caribbean, and all that. Because the struggle, when you have, just like what you said, it's the black struggle.
Yes.
And we find black people everywhere.
Yes.
So what do you think?
Well,
I think that's how we met,
that's
right?
That's right. I am, at least one component of my ideology is Pan-Africanism. So as a Pan-Africanist, I see a worldwide struggle of black people. You know, the oppression of African Americans resulted from slavery. And slavery grew out of the process of imperial colonization.
Yeah, we have that.
You know, in Africa itself, in the Caribbean, yes, in the Caribbean, in Latin America, so on and so forth. You know, great Pan-Africanists have been people like, of course, Marcus Garvey, W.E.B. Du Bois, you know, Osagyefo Kwame Nkrumah.
Yeah, so that he influenced your life. I even saw that you have an African name.
Yes, Adimu Chunga.
Wow.
That name was given to me by Amiri Baraka, the father of the current mayor, who was a revolutionary writer and activist during his lifetime. In fact, I mentioned the Gary Convention. He gave me that name after we returned from Gary, Indiana. I asked him for an African name, you know, because this is that period, you know.
When you were like...
you know, we were like, say it loud, I'm black and I'm proud, right? We were all looking to Africa because Malcolm X, you know, told us to look to Africa to psychologically link ourselves to our motherland. And so I had asked Amiri Baraka for an African name. He gave me that name. But yes, I've been influenced by thinkers and writers and leaders of the anti-colonial struggle in Africa, like Osagyefo Kwame Nkrumah, like Amilcar Cabral, you know, like Dr. Agostinho Neto led the struggle in Mozambique, and Nelson Mandela, who was one of the leaders in South Africa, and on and on and on. Everybody knows. But I was very much influenced by Nkrumah. You know, one of the first books I read was Africa Must Unite by Kwame Nkrumah when I was out of high school. You know, after I became associated with Amiri Baraka. And of course, you know, people, even today, you know, this month marked the anniversary of the birthday of Malcolm X, El-Hajj Malik El-Shabazz. And I always urge the young people, you know, to read what Malcolm wrote. Like, I think the autobiography is great. You know, they give that, some schools, you know, give it to children and students to read. But having read the autobiography and having read Malcolm's speeches, I really urge people to read what Malcolm said. Like, there's a book called Malcolm X Speaks, and another one called By Any Means Necessary, and another one called Malcolm X on Afro-American History, and on and on and on. To read what Malcolm said, because much of what he said in the 1960s is still relevant today, just like Dr. King. You know, to read what Dr. King said. You know, Dr. King had a Pan-African perspective. A lot of people don't associate that with Dr., but he did. You know, he traveled to the Caribbean. He traveled to Africa. Nkrumah invited Dr. King to the Independence Day celebration in Ghana. You know, in the late 50s, I think. I can't remember the exact year. But yes, all of us, those of us who are of African descent, we should work together to uplift each other as much as possible. You know, and we have work to do in that area. You know, like in certain eras, you see a great deal of collaboration. In some eras, you see less collaboration. I think we're back in an era now where people say, yes, we must get together again and unite and try to help one another. Like, although I'm a black person here in New Jersey, I'm concerned about brothers and sisters in Haiti. I'm concerned about brothers and sisters in the Sudan. I'm concerned about brothers and sisters in the Congo, you know, and throughout the continent, you know, because oppression, you know, is all around this world, you know, all around.
Okay, Larry, before we continue, I'm going to change
All right,
language,
let's
okay?
go.
Donc voilà, aujourd'hui, je suis avec Lawrence Hamm, qui est candidat au Sénat américain, et nous avons parlé de s'unir, l'Afrique, l'Amérique. Il est très important de se mettre ensemble pour être plus fort. Et il a écrit, il est l'auteur d'un livre qui s'appelle Une vie dans la lutte. Et la lutte, c'est un combat de noirs. Donc les noirs, que vous soyez ou qu'on soit aux États-Unis, en Europe, en Afrique, partout dans le monde, c'est le même combat. Donc il se présente, il compte aussi lutter pour la réparation, pour l'esclavage, tout ce qui a été fait, que le collège ou le lycée soit gratuit, et aussi éliminer la pauvreté et mettre fin à l'insécurité. Donc nous allons continuer, et si vous êtes dans les parages, si vous avez accès à Amazon, vous pouvez commander ce livre, une copie de son livre qui est Une vie dans la lutte, a life in the struggle. Donc, a little bit. Okay. So we're gonna continue. So your book is very interesting. You talked also about...
I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, your book, I'm telling you, I'm like reading this book, I'm like, oh, this can be a movie. This can be a movie. And then I like the pictures that, you know, and then I can see like how Newark used to look like. You know, like I say in the 60s, 70s, I saw your struggle. I have a question. I was like,
Go ahead.
something happened to you when you turned 44.
Yes, yes.
44.
On my 44th birthday, my mother
Yes.
was literally less than a mile from this church. She was in the White House nursing home here in Orange, New Jersey. So we were visiting my mother. I used to come several times a week to visit my mother in the nursing home, and that day happened to be my 44th birthday. This was Christmas Eve. And so we visited, and on the way out, my mother said to me, when you come back, I have something to tell you. I said, now why would you tell me that on the way out the door to keep me in suspense? And so I said, what is it that you have to tell me? And she told me I was adopted. 44 years later,
old.
right?
Yes.
My mother tells me I'm adopted. And the only reason she told me is because my birth mother had found her. And it was really strange because I thought it would have been easier to find me than to find my mother in the nursing home, because my mother, you know, later on in life, she sold her home and everything and then was in the nursing home. She was in poor health. But my birth mother found my mother. And my mother gave me her number. She said, well, she told my mother, you know, I'll talk to him and I'll give him your number and he can talk to you. And I made contact. I was not born Lawrence Hamm. I found out. I was born Anthony Leroy Burton and born in Washington, D.C. And this, of course, as you can imagine, was a life-altering event, you know, and not long after talking to my mother, I went to D.C. to visit her. And as a matter of fact, she passed a year ago this month. She passed on May 19th of 2023. My mother that raised me, I was named after my father, Lawrence Hamm, who raised me, and my mother, Grace Hamm. They raised me. And I asked my mother, I said, why did you wait so long to tell me? And she said to me that I was afraid to tell you because I thought you would stop loving me. And I told her I would never stop loving her. I could not have, while some people may think being adopted in that way was a hindrance, I could not have had a better blessing. I could not have had a better mother. My mother was totally devoted to me. There wasn't a day where I didn't know where my mother was and a day that she didn't know where I was. I came home every day to home-cooked meals. I was poor and didn't know I was poor. I had new school clothes every year and a new suit for Easter every year to go to church. I never wanted for anything. I might not have gotten all the toys I wanted, but I never wanted for anything, you know. And I had all the love that a child could want. And I told my mother I could never stop loving her. And then I met my birth mother, Teresa Burton. It's very interesting because when I went to see her in Washington, she was living in a senior citizen apartment building in Washington, and I went in the apartment, and as I came through the door, I'm looking at the walls of her apartment covered with all these awards and plaques and certificates and framed newspaper art. She was an activist.
Oh.
My mother, we had never met, didn't know each other, you know, had never had any contact. She was like an activist on behalf of the senior citizens. I actually have an article from the Washington Post of her speaking at a city council meeting, blasting the city council and the mayor for not taking care of the senior citizens.
So you had that in the blood.
Well, one might say that, right? So, but I have to say, it was, how do you say it? It was a bittersweet.
You were not angry?
No, why would, no. I was not angry, no. Mm-mm. It was bittersweet because she wanted it to be as though the 44 years had never happened. At this late stage in her life, she wanted it to be as though I was always her son. And in a manner of speaking, I always was, right? But as though we had been together for 44 years. So it was painful. There were many tears. Tears on her side and tears on my side. But in time, we came closer together. You know, and I was at the hospital, you know, when she expired, when she passed away. Once we established contact, I visited her periodically, and she knew her time was coming, and, you know, she was prepared for that. And I have to say, she had her affairs in order. She had more in order than I do right now, you know. So that was definitely a chapter.
Yeah. I believe that you're a blessing. You're a blessing to our community. You're a blessing, a light in the struggle of Black people. I believe that God always had his hands on you because I know that, and I read and I know that you are a prostate cancer survivor.
Yes, I am.
So we can see what God is doing and has done.
And let me say something about the prostate cancer. For all the men who may hear this program, if you think you have an issue down there, go to the doctor. Don't put it off. The longer you put it off, the more you endanger yourself. And I'm serious about this. Because cancer spreads. See, the danger with prostate, at a certain age, my doctor said to me, when they finally diagnosed me with the cancer after I'd had the biopsy, they said to me, if I had been, because I was in my early 60s then, I'm 70 years old now, they had said, if you had come to us, say like 75, we wouldn't even operate. Because you would die from something else before you would die from that. But if you get prostate cancer when you're young, that is middle-aged or earlier, the cancer has time to spread to other parts of your body. Like the person who told me to go to Sloan Kettering in New York to get my treatment, he had waited until it was very late. And the cancer had spread from his prostate. And the prostate gland is just the size of a walnut. It had spread from his prostate to his pelvis and became bone cancer. And the bone cancer eventually caused him to pass away. So when I went and I went to the urologist. I was having checkups because, and I'll say this as quickly as I can, one of the early stages of prostate cancer is what they call prostatitis. And that's when the prostate expands. And it expands and it constricts around the urinary tract. So if a man is having problems passing urine, that's a dead sign right there that you got to go to the doctor because you have prostatitis. Now, prostatitis is not cancer, but it's on the road to cancer. So you get a biopsy and they tell you if you have cancerous cells. I had the biopsy. When I first went to Sloan Kettering, they told me I was going to have 55 radiation treatments. I was going to have to go to the hospital 3 times a week for 18 weeks. And I was in an early stage. And I was like, God, I prayed on it.
I feel
But
we met you here.
I prayed on it, but guess what happened? They re-examined me and reassessed, and 55 became, guess how many? 5.
Wow.
From 55 radiation treatments to 5 radiation treatments. And, you know, I thank God for that. But I say to people, I say to men in particular, don't be squeamish, because a lot of men, they don't want to have a prostate exam because at some point they may have to have what's called a digital examination. That's when somebody has to take their fingers and go in you to feel your prostate, because that's the only way they can reach it, to feel if it is, one, swollen, and 2, hard. Because if you have a hardness, that means you have a tumor, you know? So if you wait, you're not gonna have 5, you're gonna have 55 treatments. And if you get to the second stage, you might not just have radiation, you might also have to have chemotherapy. You know, and you know, chemotherapy is rough, you know, on the body. So to the men out there, if you don't have a urologist, find a urologist, have your examination, and then have your examination, you know, every so many years, so that if you do get this, you'll catch it at an early stage and you won't have to have radical intervention. Now, radical intervention is when they have to remove the prostate. They have to go in and take it out. And to do that, when they remove the prostate, they have to cut other nerves. And that can affect your sexual function. And I'm not saying this to be salacious. I'm saying that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure.
Okay, Larry, is there anything else? You know what? I can just listen and listen. It's just like you have like, ooh, you're like a book.
Well,
So,
I had a lot of experiences.
okay, Larry, thank you for stopping
Thank
by.
you. Thank you. Thank you,
for
Pastor.
accepting, you know.
How could I refuse? If the
invitation.
pastor says, be here, I must be here.
Thank you, Larry. Donc voilà, c'est tout pour aujourd'hui. Merci, Larry, d'avoir accepté notre invitation. Et on se retrouve très bientôt. Bye. Et surtout, n'oubliez pas d'avoir votre copie, A Life in the Struggle. And the primary on Saturday?
Tuesday.
Tuesday.
Yes. Let me just say that early voting begins on the 29th. Now, early voting means that you can go and vote at a designated polling place for early voting. You know, they open some polling places so that people can go up to, I think, the day before Election Day and vote. So if you want to do early voting, that starts on the 29th. But Election Day for regular voting is Tuesday, June 4th.
OK. Thank you. C'est très important d'aller de voter. C'est très important. Mardi, you said Tuesday, mardi, les choses commencent. Donc, il est très important d'aller voter quand on veut vraiment changer les choses, on veut changer les lois. Il est vraiment important de voter, avoir les sénateurs, se faire représenter. Donc, merci pour votre temps et à très bientôt. Bye. Thank you, Larry.
Thank you.
OK. Bye.
Good. Bye-bye.